Today we're diving deep into the economic policies and future plans of Argentina's president, Javier Milei.
A self-described anarcho-capitalist.
Right.
It's quite a story.
It is, and our main source for this deep dive is going to be his recent conversation with Lex Fridman.
A great interview, by the way, where Milei really goes in depth.
Yeah, absolutely. So for our listeners out there, we're going to assume you've got a basic understanding of economics, so we're going to jump right into the specifics of Milei's policies.
And what he wants to achieve.
Exactly.
So let's start with Milei's path to becoming a leading figure in anarcho-capitalism.
No?
It's rooted in his questioning of traditional economic growth theory.
Interesting.
He observed that global per capita GDP and living standards were rising despite increasing returns and wealth concentration, a phenomenon that really challenged established economic thinking.
Right.
This led him down a rabbit hole, you could say,
Down a rabbit hole.
exploring alternative schools of thought,
And which one in particular caught his eye?
particularly the Austrian school, championed by economists like Ludwig von Mises and Friedrich Hayek.
Big names.
Yeah. Giants in the field, and their work ultimately shaped his economic and political philosophy.
So it's fascinating to see how this theoretical foundation is now being applied in a real-world setting.
With Milei at the helm of a nation grappling with some very real economic challenges.
So then how do we reconcile the fact that we have an anarcho-capitalist?
Someone who ideally wants no state.
Right, becoming a president.
Well, Milei views this as a pragmatic approach.
Okay.
He calls it adapting to the state conditions of reality.
State conditions.
In essence, he acknowledges the need to work within the existing system to achieve progress.
Towards his ultimate goal.
Exactly, towards greater freedom.
So he's strategically working within the system to push for his vision.
Precisely, he's not waiting for a stateless utopia to materialize. He's working to move towards that ideal from within the system.
And we see this pragmatic approach reflected in his economic policies.
Absolutely.
So let's get into those. Milei inherited a pretty dire economic situation, right?
Absolutely dire.
Hyperinflation was looming. Wholesale inflation was at a staggering 54%.
Which, if annualized, suggested a potential rate of 17,000%.
It's hard to even fathom.
Unthinkable. And on top of that, the country had experienced a decade of stagnant growth,
Right.
with poverty rates near 50% and a massive fiscal deficit of 15% of GDP.
So a lot of problems to tackle.
A whole lot of problems.
So what did he do?
Well, he acted decisively and swiftly implemented a series of drastic measures to reduce the size and scope of government.
Okay, such a...
He drastically reduced the number of ministries from 21 to just 8.
Wow.
Significantly downsized the government workforce, halted public works projects, and ended discretionary transfers to provinces.
It sounds like he really took a chainsaw to government spending.
He did. He also targeted social programs, specifically those that relied on intermediaries, what he called poverty managers.
Interesting. What's the thinking there?
He argued that these intermediaries were skimming funds,
Oh, I see.
and that direct aid would be more efficient and less prone to corruption. He also restored utility rates to market levels, a move that, although potentially unpopular, was aimed at addressing price distortions created by government subsidies.
So a lot of bold moves right off the bat.
Very bold. And you know what? They had a significant and immediate impact.
Really?
In his first month in office, Milei achieved a fiscal surplus,
Wow.
a feat Argentina hadn't seen in 16 years.
That's incredible.
Wholesale inflation plummeted to 2%, and poverty rates fell by 11 percentage points.
Those are remarkable achievements in such a short period.
They are. It suggests that his approach of shrinking the government and allowing the private sector to take the lead might be yielding positive results, at least in the short term.
It seems to be aligning with his core economic philosophy.
Exactly. Reduce the government's role and unleash the power of the free market.
So by returning resources to the private sector, he aims to stimulate economic dynamism.
And recovery.
Now, his chainsaw approach wasn't limited to economic policy.
No. He also targeted corruption, which had become deeply entrenched in the Argentine system.
He saw it as a drag on economic growth, I imagine.
Absolutely, and a violation of individual liberty.
So how did he tackle this corruption?
He implemented what he called the anti-blockade protocol,
Okay.
a measure designed to curb the frequent street blockades by those receiving welfare benefits.
Interesting.
By reducing these disruptions, Milei aimed to restore order and send a clear message that the government wouldn't tolerate such tactics.
And during his tenure, former President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner was convicted for corruption charges.
Related to public works projects during her time in office.
Right.
Now, while Milei wasn't directly involved in the prosecution, this event highlighted his commitment to judicial independence.
as a tool against corruption.
Precisely, he sees an independent judiciary as essential for upholding the rule of law and ensuring accountability.
His fight for freedom goes beyond economic policy, though, doesn't it?
It does. It extends to freedom of speech.
Of course, a cornerstone of a free society.
He believes that government interference in this realm is a form of tyranny.
And one of his first actions as president was to eliminate all government-funded advertising.
A move he framed as a blow against media manipulation.
So he's saying that such funding creates perverse incentives for media outlets.
To toe the government line and stifle dissenting voices.
And as an alternative, he seems to champion platforms like X, formerly Twitter,
He sees them as vital alternatives to traditional media.
which he believes is often biased.
And beholden to special interests, he sees these platforms as tools for bypassing traditional gatekeepers.
Fostering open dialogue.
And debate.
So now that we've looked at his actions to tackle these immediate crises, let's shift our attention to his more long-term plans for Argentina.
Starting with his proposal to dollarize the Argentine economy.
Been a controversial idea.
It is, but it's important to clarify that Milei doesn't advocate solely for the dollar.
Right.
He champions the concept of currency competition.
Allowing people to choose.
Exactly, allowing people to freely choose the currency that best serves their needs.
And he sees dollarization as one potential outcome.
Of this competition.
So explain this concept of endogenous dollarization.
Sure, so Milei believes that if people lose faith in the unstable peso,
Which is understandable.
and increasingly opt for the dollar, a process of endogenous dollarization will occur
So the dollar would become the de facto currency,
through the choices of individuals and businesses.
not through government decree.
Exactly, and this is key to his plan to eventually eliminate the central bank.
He's not a fan of central banks.
He views them as inherently prone to manipulation and inflation.
Interesting.
He believes that a truly free market requires a decentralized monetary system driven by individual choice.
Now, Milei's ideas have garnered attention beyond Argentina.
They've certainly caught the eye of some prominent figures.
He's been in dialogue with Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, who are heading an initiative called the DOGE Department of Government Efficiency in the U.S.
Aiming to streamline government operations and reduce bureaucracy.
So what's Milei's advice to them?
He keeps it simple, just cut to the chase.
Straight to the point.
He urges them to relentlessly remove regulations and slash public spending.
As the most effective means of expanding freedom and promoting economic prosperity.
Precisely, he believes that less government is the path to a freer and more prosperous society.
Milei's commitment to freedom as the foundation of a flourishing society is evident.
In both his words and his actions.
He truly believes in the power of individual liberty to drive innovation, economic growth, and human progress.
He's a fervent believer in the power of the free market.
His approach is definitely radical, and his policies have sparked intense debate.
Both within Argentina and internationally.
He's a controversial figure for sure.
But there's no denying that he's a force to be reckoned with, and his presidency is a fascinating experiment.
In real-time application of free market principles.
It's a story that's still unfolding.
His story is far from over, and the ultimate impact of his policies remains to be seen.
But one thing is clear.
Javier Milei is shaking things up.
And his presidency is a bold test of whether his radical vision can truly transform a nation.
It hasn't been all smooth sailing for Milei, though.
No, of course not. He's faced resistance.
From those who benefit from the existing system.
The entrenched interests.
Exactly. The ones who feel threatened by his reforms.
And probably skepticism from everyday citizens, too.
Oh, absolutely. People who are concerned about the potential short-term costs of his policies.
Which are radical.
There's no doubt about that. But Milei acknowledges these concerns.
And how does he address them?
He emphasizes that he's not trying to impose his vision overnight.
It's a process.
He's focused on achieving incremental progress, constantly testing the boundaries of what's achievable within the system.
So it's a balancing act.
It is between his long-term goals and the realities of governing a nation.
With all its different interests and perspectives.
Exactly. He's navigating this complex terrain by persistently pushing for change, but recognizing the need for gradual implementation.
So he's sticking to his principles? Absolutely. Even when faced with pushback, he remains steadfast in his commitment to his core beliefs.
It's his unwavering resolve.
That perhaps defines him most as a leader.
It's interesting to see how his background as an economist,
Deeply grounded in theory,
intersects with his role as a politician, dealing with the messy realities of implementation.
he's trying to bridge that gap.
Between abstract ideas and tangible results.
It's a tough challenge.
And His success hinges on his ability to persuade the Argentine people that the potential long-term benefits
Of his policies,
outweigh any short-term sacrifices.
which requires effective communication.
And transparency.
Absolutely. He needs to clearly explain his vision and the rationale behind his actions.
Build that public trust.
Exactly. Milei understands this. He knows that public trust and understanding are crucial for his reforms to be sustainable.
So how does he go about building that trust?
He's adopted a direct and accessible communications style.
Avoiding the usual political jargon.
He wants to be clear and concise.
And he's also known for using humor and pop culture references to connect with people.
It's a bit of a departure from the traditional image of a politician.
It is, but it seems to be working. He's resonating with a segment of the population.
Particularly those who are disillusioned with the political establishment.
And we can't forget his efforts to combat corruption.
A deeply ingrained problem in Argentina.
He's not just going after individuals, though, is he?
No, he's trying to dismantle the systems that perpetuate corruption.
Like his elimination of the poverty manager network.
That's a prime example. He recognized that these intermediaries were siphoning off funds.
Meant for the most vulnerable.
Exactly, and that removing them would reduce corruption and ensure that aid reached its intended recipients.
A two birds, one stone kind of approach.
You could say that.
And he's also taken aim at the media.
Which he sees as complicit in maintaining the status quo.
Protecting vested interests.
Right. His decision to eliminate government-funded advertising was a direct challenge to this system.
Cutting off a major source of revenue from many outlets.
A controversial move, for sure.
But one that's forced a reevaluation of the Argentine media landscape.
And highlighted the need for alternative platforms for information.
Platforms that are less susceptible to government influence.
And more aligned with Milei's vision of free speech and open dialogue.
Which brings us to his embrace of social media.
Platforms like X in particular.
It shows his belief in the power of decentralized communication.
To bypass traditional gatekeepers and engage directly with citizens.
He's not using these platforms to broadcast his message, though.
No, he's actively participating in debates, responding to criticisms, and facilitating real-time policy discussions.
He's trying to democratize the flow of information.
And empower citizens to hold those in power accountable.
So he's become both a target and a champion.
A target of those who benefit from the old system, and a champion of those who want a more transparent and accountable government.
He's disrupted the traditional power dynamics of Argentine politics.
Blurring the lines between traditional media, social media, and political discourse.
It's a dynamic shift that's still unfolding.
With unpredictable consequences.
His presidency is a gamble, isn't it?
It is a high-stakes one. He's betting on transparency, the free market, and the resilience of the Argentine people.
To usher in a new era
of prosperity and freedom.
It's an incredibly ambitious vision.
Undeniably, he's trying to undo decades of economic mismanagement and corruption.
While also reshaping the role of government.
It's a massive undertaking, and while the grand scope of his plans is captivating,
sometimes it's the smaller details that are most revealing.
Exactly like his stance on the single paper ballot.
Seems like a minor electoral reform.
It might seem that way, but he views it as crucial for ensuring fair and transparent elections.
He believes the previous system was vulnerable to manipulation.
And fraud. He sees the single paper ballot as a simple but effective way to level the playing field.
And give every citizen an equal voice.
It's a reminder that real change often starts with addressing the seemingly small practical issues.
The things that have a direct impact on people's lives.
Building trust starts with demonstrating a commitment to fairness and transparency.
In every aspect of governance.
It's about showing people that you care about the details.
And Milei seems to be very detail-oriented.
He is. He's not just focused on the big picture. He's digging into the nuts and bolts of how systems operate.
Identifying inefficiencies and working to streamline processes.
Like with deregulation.
He sees excessive regulations as a form of oppression.
Stifling innovation, hindering entrepreneurship, and limiting individual choice.
So his drive to cut red tape is about empowering people.
To take control of their own lives, to pursue their own dreams.
To create a more dynamic and prosperous society.
It's a bold experiment, a departure from the traditional model of government intervention and control. It all stems from his belief that the free market guided by individual choices is the most effective engine for economic growth and societal well-being.
So he really believes that government intervention often does more harm than good.
That's his view. He thinks it creates distortions and inefficiencies.
That stifle innovation.
And limit opportunities.
And this belief extends to his stance on currency competition.
The idea that allowing multiple currencies to circulate freely will lead to a more robust and adaptable monetary system.
He's challenging the status quo.
He's challenging the conventional wisdom of central bank control and fiat currency.
He's really going against the grain.
Absolutely. He's arguing that a truly free market should extend to the realm of money.
And this brings us back to his proposal to dollarize the Argentine economy.
Or at least allow for currency competition with the dollar.
That sparked a lot of debate.
It has proponents argue that it could provide much-needed stability and curb inflation.
While critics worry about losing monetary sovereignty.
And potential negative impacts on domestic industries.
It's a complex issue.
It is with valid arguments on both sides.
But Milei's stance is clear.
He believes that allowing individuals and businesses to choose the currency that best suits their needs
will ultimately lead to the most efficient and equitable outcomes.
That's his conviction. He envisions a system where the best currency or currencies will prevail through market competition.
Survival of the fittest, in a way.
You could say that.
So his approach is rooted in a deep distrust of centralized power.
And a strong belief in decentralized systems.
He believes that limiting government intervention is the best way to ensure prosperity and progress.
It's a fundamental principle for him.
But his critics are concerned about the potential consequences of these radical reforms.
They question whether the free market alone can effectively address issues of inequality and social safety nets.
And environmental protection.
Right. They believe that government has a role to play in mitigating market failures and ensuring a just and equitable society.
So there are concerns about the potential downsides.
There are, but Milei believes that the potential benefits of greater freedom and economic dynamism outweigh those risks.
He has faith in the power of individual liberty.
Empowered by the free market and guided by sound economic principles.
He believes this is the best path forward for Argentina.
It's a bold vision.
And a risky one.
The challenges are immense, and the stakes are high. But there's no doubt that Javier Milei's presidency is a bold and audacious attempt to reshape a nation's destiny.
It's captivating to watch it unfold.
It is his unwavering commitment to his principles. His radical vision and his willingness to challenge the status quo have made him a figure of global interest.
It really begs the question.
Will his experiment succeed?
Only time will tell.
Whether his radical vision will truly take root and transform Argentina, or whether the entrenched forces of the status quo will prevail.
It's a story that's still being written.
It is, but regardless of the outcome, Milei's story is a compelling case study.
In The Power of Ideas, the complexities of implementing change and the enduring debate over the role of government in society.
It's a reminder that ideas have consequences.
And that the battle of ideas shapes not only the economic and political landscape,
but also the lives of everyday people.
Milei's presidency is a testament to that.
It's a fascinating case study in leadership and the challenges of enacting radical change.
And we'll certainly be watching closely to see how it all unfolds.
It's a story that's far from over.
And that's it for our deep dive into the economic policies and future plans of Javier Milei,
Argentina's anarcho-capitalist president.
Thanks for joining us.